So you did not have an alcoholic drink
No.
from 21 to 36?
No, it was just a fortunate superstition. I had this epiphany that I wanted to be a fighter and that where I wasn't serving me. And it was just a very strong feeling. And I just decided that that was it. And even though alcohol in itself probably wasn't the reason that I did so well, but I think it was a measure of how much I wanted something. You know, I think if you're not assessing, you're guessing.
Welcome to Inside the Shoulder. I'm Kenneth Cutbush and I'm joined by Chris Haseman today. Chris Haseman is the original MMA fighter for Australia. He's fought in rings in the world title fight in rings in the last tournament. He has fought in the UFC 38. He's also instructor for the Queensland Police Academy. He's instructed in Iraq. He set up a training system for the Iraqi police during the Iraq War. And he's trained the Broncos as well. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, Ken. How are you?
Oh, good. I'd like to go back to your early years and just how you got there. What was it like? What was the struggle like?
Right, well, I guess I did jiu-jitsu as a kid. My father was a jiu-jitsu instructor. He actually was brought up on a poultry farm, and it was a rather large poultry farm. And his father died. He was probably about 11 or 12. So when he got to a more of an adult age, I guess, where he had to take responsibility of the farm, he realised he didn't like chooks, but he loved jiu-jitsu. So this was about 1974, 75. And so he decided to give the poultry farm away and become a full-time jiu-jitsu instructor, which I can say in those years wasn't a really lucrative living. So, but I guess he was always doing classes. He worked in police shift clubs at night time, worked in schools during the day teaching self-defense, and still does today at 76. He still has a school he teaches every week. So in order to see Dad, I had to go to a jiu-jitsu class, you know, and that's pretty much how my jiu-jitsu career started.
Where was that? Where was that jiu-jitsu class?
Like I said, he worked in police shift clubs. So 2 nights a week would be at Lang Park, which is Suncorp now, but Lang Park Police Youth Club. And the other 2 nights would be at Ipswich Police Youth Club, which was the Monday and Wednesday. So there's 4 nights a week.
And how did he get into jiu-jitsu?
I think he watched way too many Bruce Lee movies and decided that I think he started with judo under Maurice Morabito, who ended up being my judo instructor.
Yeah.
And so from judo, he then progressed and transitioned over to jiu-jitsu. I suppose that's a story on its own, but somehow he got there. And it's sort of like for all of us kids, my stepbrother, you know, he went into prisons. Jiu-jitsu helped him get into the training role in prisons, and before you know it, he was a general manager, and now he's doing really well in that sector. So, you know, jiu-jitsu's done quite well for us as maybe an education.
Who else in the family? How many other brothers and sisters do you have?
I've got 2 stepbrothers, Peter and Troy, and a half-sister, which is Shay. Yeah, wow. I'm really the only one that pursued it past probably, you know, the teenage years.
Did you always want to be a jiu-jitsu exponent? Did you want to?
Yeah.
When did that come? That you
as a
wanted
young
to do
kid,
MMA?
as a young kid, you know, when, like I say, they're really creative years, and probably like most kids, you have dreams, and that used to be a dream of mine. You know, just to stand in front of the mirror or any reflection and just kick for hours and punch. You know, I remember that.
And what was the dream then? Because there wasn't UFC at the time.
There wasn't.
There was boxing.
But once again, there were Bruce Lee movies and then Van Damme movies. And before you know it, you know, you're sort of like,
Yeah, right.
yes, trying to take after them.
And what was the training like? You know, what did you have to do?
Well, jiu-jitsu back then was very different. Like when we talk about jiu-jitsu now, most people will talk about Brazilian jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
and which is, you know, a very good game, ground game. Back then, I was fortunate enough that the jiu-jitsu that my father was teaching had really derived from judo. So it did have, and Morris Morabito was a very good ground fighter. So I think from a very young age, I learnt the ground skills of judo and the throwing skills of judo, and then it was complemented more by maybe more of a karate style in our stand-up. Mm-hmm. So it was a bits of a bitzer, you know, and probably evolved into a system throughout the years. And really, it evolved with Dad. Dad enjoyed fighting and competition back in the young days, so that's pretty much how the classes were taught. And as he got older, he then moved more into a self-defense, you know, and also maybe a little bit softer, Aikido sort of driven style, because that's what he was good at as he aged.
Now, you brought in your black belt.
I did.
To show everyone.
I was asked to bring in something that meant something to me, and I was going through my box of memorabilia, and you know, and then I saw my black belt, and I thought it was something. I think if I look at the black belt being central to any success that I'd had in life, I could always go back to jiu-jitsu, if not jiu-jitsu, the art, maybe for the discipline and the attitude, you know, and the teachings from just not my father, but so many other instructors along the way that have contributed, you know, to the way that I think and behave in life.
How old were you when you got that?
23. I probably should have got it much younger, but I probably wasn't as focused in my later teenage years, you know, from that 17 to 20, you know, life and partying and those sort of things sort of got in the way.
You told me you were thinking of being in a rock band.
Yeah, I was.
Oh, you were?
I was. I played in a band. It's a terrible name. It was Smell My Finger, but I was a rhythm guitarist, and the band didn't actually need a rhythm guitarist, but I had a company car, which was a station wagon. So I was the only one that could fit all the drums and guitars and get everyone to band practice. So I sort of worked my way into a band.
What did you play?
Rhythm guitar.
Rhythm guitar, right.
Very badly. You know, once then that goes back to decision-making skills back in those years, you know, like, you know, sliding door moments. I'm very glad that I didn't pursue that because I was no good at it, and I'm sure it wouldn't have gone very far.
Now, you brought in a photo, and I love this one. Tell us about this photo, Chris.
It's the last drink I had.
Chris with long hair.
Yeah.
And what are you drinking there? What's in your
Rum
hand?
and Coke.
A glass of rum and Coke.
Yeah. And
so long hair, sitting at a table with some mates, is it?
Yes.
And 21, just the weekend of your 21st birthday.
Yep. And
that's basically the last drink you had. For how long?
36.
36. We'll go into that in soon. Yeah. But yeah, so you did not have an alcoholic drink.
No.
From 21 to 36.
No, it was I don't know if you want to. It was just a fortunate superstition that I had this epiphany that I wanted to be a fighter, and that where I wasn't serving me, and it was just a very strong feeling, and I just decided that was it. And even though alcohol in itself probably wasn't the reason that I did so well, but I think it was a measure of how much I wanted something. You know, I think if you're not assessing, you're guessing. And as much as I love the party life and that sort of lifestyle, while I didn't do it, I guess it showed me that I was on track and how much, you know, I wanted to be successful in the MMA game or the fighting game.
So to me, it sounds like 15 years of complete focus and determination and grit to get to where you got to.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking back now, yeah, I have a lot of OCD traits, and they all worked for me. They were like a little superpower, I guess. As much as it might take me 10 minutes to leave the house, even though I'm ready to go, they're things, because when you're fighting, and I suppose with any sport, it comes down to the real small things. The things that probably people don't see, and so when you win, you try to recreate that scenario. And so you doing the same thing exactly the same way and trying not to deviate to try and replicate that win next time, and then that builds into, I guess you could call it discipline, but it is sort of an OCD.
So 21, you got your black belt at 23. It sounds like things, you dug in then. What happened with your training?
Yeah, I suppose sports science wasn't a real thing back then. And I refer to it like instinctive training. If I look back now, I would have done things completely different. But instinctive training was more the further I ran, the harder I ran, the more weights I lifted, the more times I went to gym, the more time I spent on the mat, the better I would be. And so I guess in those early years, it did progress me to where I needed to be, but I don't think if you measured it, it was probably, the right thing to do in the way that I looked at training and programming.
How many hours a day were you training?
Well, I was really fortunate because in 1996, I got a job at the Queensland Police Service, and as a physical skills instructor or operational skills instructor. And that job, I used to call it like almost like the government sponsorship. I was wrestling recruits, I was running, swimming, every single day you could do as much fitness as you could fit into a day. And then when I'd finish work, I'd go and do my jiu-jitsu. So
how many hours is that?
Probably with a class, probably a good hour and a half of rolling most nights. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so completely overtraining, but with absolutely no measuring and assessing.
Yeah, right. Mm. Yeah, you said you would do things differently if you did again. What would you do differently?
Oh, probably take the things that I've learnt from sports science and working with some great sports scientists that I have through the football, and just understanding how to program and regulate training, being able to measure when fatigue's setting in. I suppose, doing RPEs and just, monitoring your outputs and your inputs.
All right. Mm. So not overtraining.
Not overtraining. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Had you always been fighting?
Yes, I had always been fighting. As jiu-jitsu, we used to have what we call all-style competitions, and which were basically judo with a karate influence as well. You could have strikes and throws and hold-downs. And that took me through, as junior age into senior age. We'd have things like South Pacific titles. You'd go to New Zealand, fight over there, or New Zealand would come over here. And then around about 23, I was approached by a fight promoter, who had just moved to Japan. And he rang me and said, look, I think there's a real opportunity for you over here. And I said, okay. So he sent over a contract. I signed it. And next minute I get a phone call that says, you're on. And so I had my first big fight in Japan in, I think, 1994 by this stage. And that's when my career in Japan started.
Who was that against?
Misha, Alukai Misha. He had just won the Russian cage fighting championships.
All right.
Yeah, and that was my first fight.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
What was that? The first fight in a ring?
My first real fight. Yeah, as in that's it. And I did okay. Like I think I went about 5 minutes. In those days, I think they were 30-minute rounds.
Yeah.
And they weren't called MMA. You know, it was basically, I think in Japan it was called shoot fighting at the time. And I think I survived the 5 minutes completely on adrenaline. There wasn't too much tactics or anything. It was just complete adrenaline.
Because this is, for the audience, this is a ring with it's a boxing ring, isn't it? It's not a cage. It's a boxing ring with ropes.
Yeah.
And you're in there. And did you have gloves?
No.
No gloves.
No.
Open hand.
Open hand, yeah. And then it progressed. So my first no rules fight was in Alabama. I think maybe 95.
Alabama in the USA.
Yeah.
So you said your first
Real no rules, like
no rules.
bare fists, headbutts. The referee was simply a spectator, you know.
So that was 1995.
So yeah, 95,
And the UFC,
96.
at the beginnings of the UFC were 1991, weren't they?
I'm unsure, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm unsure, but yeah, it still wasn't in a household. You know, people weren't watching it at the pub.
No.
And probably still had the term barbaric.
Yeah.
You know, but Alabama was it a 16? Might have been a 16-man tournament. There were 30-minute fights, and basically you just gave up, or got knocked out. Mm-hmm. That was how you lost, or you tapped them out and knocked them out to win. And I just watched this fight. I was in the dressing room and I was watching it on the TV, and there was a Carlos Beretta. He's a big Brazilian, and he fought this Russian, and the fight went for 30 minutes. And honestly, Carlos beat the living hell out of him. And when the Russian came back into my dressing room, it looked like he'd been hit by a truck. You know, the eyes were closed, the head was swollen. And I said to my coach, Bill Turner, and Bill Turner is another story, but he was my wrestling coach. And at that stage, he was, I think, senior sergeant at the Queensland Police Service, probably regarded as one of the toughest police officers to ever go through the QPS, if not the toughest. I said to Bill before I went out, which I was the next fight, I said, remind me never to fight that Carlos. And the story goes, a couple of years later, I get to King of Kings in Japan, where it's a 32. They pick 32 fighters, and you fight it out over a couple of months. One tournament 1 month, one the next, and then the final the next. And so I was stoked to be part of the 32. And you know, it's got some big name fighters on there. And so when I went there, I got Carlos Beretta as my first draw. And I walked into Maida, who ran rings, and I said, how come you got me against him on the first round? Like, I'm, just this guy from Australia, and you got me against Carlos Beretta.
Because Carlos is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu,
black belt,
and he's Gracie trained.
Yeah.
And they were just cleaning the everyone up, weren't they? At the time?
At that stage. And he talked me into fighting. I think he actually even gave me a bit more money. And but I got there, and Carlos has got his. We didn't fight in gis or anything, but he did have his black belt on as I'm walking up there, and he was smiling with his big grin. And Bill just said, just do me one favour. He says, just wipe that grin off his face and we can go home. And probably one of the first punches I threw really hit him, and it changed his facial expression. And that was it. I beat him on decision and went to go through King of Kings.
Yeah, wow. That must have been a big thing then.
Yeah, self-belief. I think that was a lesson of self-belief on that one.
Because you're there in Japan, you're away from everyone in Australia, and there's all these Brazilians and Japanese fighters, Russians, and you're the Australian. How did that feel? Did you feel out of place?
Yeah, because quite often rings would say, got you a fight, can't afford a corner, where, the Americans were all going over in teams. There's Matt Hughes and Jeremy Horns and, the Russians and the Dutch, they're all in teams. And so, and that's, and you talk about mindset, I would be really confident. I'd train hard, get on the plane. I'd try and keep my mindset focused on maybe not even thinking about the fight, just trying to keep calm and relaxed. But in those days, we'd all be in the same hotel, and come fight day, we'd all hop in the same bus. And so I'd be sitting in a bus on my own, and you'd see the all huddling in their little groups, and they're all having fun and, a bit of camaraderie around themselves. So it was really hard to keep that mindset. I always say that for me, winning or losing was all done in the dressing room. It was just how I felt in the dressing room, which really had nothing to do with how I trained to get there, I think.
I see people watching the UFC now, and everyone's always focused on who wins and who loses. But I've always thought about the fighter getting into the ring in the first place, just how daunting that would be, stepping into that ring, particularly now it's a cage and they close the door on you. How did that feel the first couple of times you did that?
Yeah, I think it is hard to explain. It's because there are some times, and there have been some moments where I've actually felt confident, felt relaxed, and felt like I really just want to get out there and actually have a great fight. Just not win, I just want to have a great fight. And I wish I could bottle those moments, but I don't know what the formula was. The difference between that and, having it being quite a daunting experience and sort of like wishing it away. But it's very hard to explain, but there are some days it takes everything you've got to actually walk down that runway, and not only that, put on a face that is trying to say, hey, I'm confident, I feel like I'm going to win, and I can psych you out, because that's what everyone's trying to do, and keep those real feelings of what's happening deep inside. It's the game face.
Pretty confronting. Mm. So then, the big point of your career was that heavyweight title for Rings. It was the last tournament for Rings before the UFC, and you went and fought Fedor. Fedor had Russian Fedor Emelianenko. How do you pronounce his last name?
Emelianenko.
Yeah. And he'd had 11 fights. He's gone on to be titled, you were Hammer, Chris Haseman the Hammer, and he was Fedor the last emperor, which he's gone on to. And he's widely regarded now as the greatest MMA fighter of all time by many people, and you went in to fight with him into the ring. I've seen the video. My God, I couldn't imagine doing something like that.
Yeah. People ask what it was like fighting him, and I could say, I guess it's like a Mack truck with no off switch. He launches that power at you, and not only that, his dexterity is so unique. Punches come from, a very unique place. It's not like, because what I find, the more you train and the more you box and the more you do things, the more in rhythm you become. There's only so many combos, and as you start to understand body mechanics, so let's just take boxing or kickboxing, when that left is there, there's generally only a couple of other things that can come, know, and that's why sometimes fighting someone that's never trained can be quite difficult, because they're so uncoordinated and they do things that you shouldn't do. But I think Fedor just had a unique way in which he launched all his attacks. They came from a very unorthodox style with power and commitment.
I just can't quite fathom it. I've watched it just recently, and I still can't. I can't imagine me actually taking that step to go into the ring. And we've trained together. You've trained me for years. We used to go training at 5 a.m. every morning. And I remember you teaching me some of those things, but I still couldn't make that step to get into the ring.
Yeah, it's a certain human.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Huge thing. So then that was when you were 36?
Yeah.
And
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And I think I remember you telling me once that you walked out of that fight and you went and had a drink. And you were in Japan on your own,
Yeah.
I think.
I still remember the word, Asahi.
Asahi.
That's it. Well, rings was like a family to me. I'd had quite a few fights in rings, and got to know fighters and had some great experience. I mean, rings took me to Russia, took me to Holland, took me to America, just not Japan, and every city pretty much in Japan, where we would fight in a different city like every month. There would be, I wouldn't fight every month, but they would put on a show in every city once a month. So it was quite a big organisation. So when it finished,
that was the last tournament, wasn't it? That was the end of rings. Because then it was bought by UFC, was it? Or
no, I just think they just closed it down. I think that was it because
UFC was coming, wasn't it?
It was
the 2000s,
and I think the economy wasn't great.
Yeah.
When I remember my first fight at the Budokan, my first win was against Willie Peters from Holland, which would have been, I think it was my second fight. Willie had just won the cage fighting championships in Holland. And so they matched me with him at the Budokan, and it was a big show, like 20,000 people. Don't quote me on that, but large numbers. And that was my first win. And so, but as the shows went on over the years, you could see the audience was getting smaller and smaller. I think more people watching it on TV probably had a big influence.
What was the pain like preparing to get to that point? What did you have to do? What did it cost you to get to there?
I think a couple of shoulders, as you know. Like I said, the training I did was instinctive, and back then we just didn't have an MMA class to go to. So what you were doing is you were finding boxes to box, on a Friday morning somewhere, going to judo classes, doing some wrestling, and so you were just doing bits and bitses. There wasn't really one place you could go like you can now. You can just go to a mixed martial arts schools now and basically get everything you want. Back then, it was really about, traveling and everyone should. I used to have a gym in the backyard. I built a big shed, had a couple of acres, so I built a big shed, and people used to drive from Toowoomba, from Sunshine Coast, just to come to this place because it was probably at that stage the first MMA venue or training venue in the country.
Yeah, right. Who was training with you at the time?
Well, Dan Higgins was one.
Higgins?
Yeah, Dan Higgins. Sam Nest, who did really well as well. My coach, Bill Turner.
Yeah.
But even in that backyard shed, I even had people like Sam Greco. He was a really like a world champion Kokushin fighter who was fighting in Japan in, I guess, an MMA. And he flew up, spent a week with me just before he went to Japan just to train, So the likes of those people would come through and train with me because it was the only place where you're getting, stand up and ground fighting all in one place.
And how many hours a day were you training?
I don't know. Sometimes it's hard. Like going back to the police service, I'd have.
So you're still working at the police service?
Yeah.
And they were letting you take time off to go and do everything you needed to do?
Yeah, well, Bill Turner was in charge and he was my coach.
Yeah, right.
So it sort of worked out well for me.
Yeah.
And as long as I did my work, but it was just the perfect environment for me. So it was, where you're meant to be. I always look in life as I go through it, there's certain little moments where you can say, I've actually meant to be here. So it's nice that I know I'm on the journey.
Yeah.
because it was too much of a coincidence that this actually happened at this time, at this moment. And so it showed me that I was actually meant to be there. And, I could, there was people there who were gun runners, and they used to call me Hazy at the police service. Come on, Hazy, let's go for a run. I go, oh, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. Nah, come on, let's go for a slow one. And it was never a slow run, or let's go do some laps in the pool, or let's go to the gym. And you just couldn't say no. It was just a very competitive environment between everyone there.
Yeah, right. Now, family, how did you manage your family then, going overseas and, going to Netherlands, going to Japan all the time? You had two young girls at the time?
Yeah, probably Kristen, she was born in 1999. I'm pretty sure I got that right. She was, I remember I'd be training up in my shed, and I'd have a little kick shield that sort of like was a half dome. And I remember just putting it in the side and putting her in it and putting some other kick shields around her so no one fell on her, and so they were early times, I guess, and just fortunate enough that life worked out, with the family. Sometimes my wife would get a free trip to Japan or somewhere like that along the way, but most times I'd be off on my own.
And then the next thing was, what came after that, after the title fight?
I had a couple more fights. Actually,
You did
after
UFC?
UFC 38.
UFC 38. Who'd you fight there?
Evan Tanner.
Yep.
And Evan Tanner ended up being a UFC world champion.
Yeah, right.
And then I think I had another couple of fights in Japan, and then I had a fight here in Australia, and I fought a Canadian, and his name was Bill Mahood. Mm-hmm. And I really trained hard for it because I hadn't fought in Australia for probably 4 years, and it was down the Gold Coast, and friends, family, it was completely packed. And on that fight, Bill got the better of me. In actual fact, it was that loud when the bell went for the first round, because there were 3 5-minute rounds. When the bell went for the first round, we were still fighting because even the ref couldn't hear the bell. There was just, the crowd was that loud. And so it went to about the last round, and I had really copped it and really didn't know where I was. And I told the ref if he stopped it, I was going to punch him. I had my dad in my corner, he hopped out of his seat. He wanted me to stop, but I didn't. I kept going, and then Bill, who was in my corner, threw the towel in.
Yeah, right.
And I thought that's it, because I fought in Vegas too, not long before that. Forget who I fought there, but I copped a good hit there as well. Mm-hmm. So just the last couple of fights, I had noticed that I probably wore a lot to the head, mm-hmm. and I wasn't feeling good. So I decided that was it.
How old were you?
It's got to be late 30s by that stage. I thought, that's it. And I was working at the Queensland Police Service, and then I got offered a role over in Iraq with the National Police Training Program, mm-hmm. because when the US or the coalition went in, they disbanded the whole police and military service. And then it came a time to where they needed to retrain. That's what they called re-blue. And I was just in the right place at the right time. I got offered a job, went over as a training manager. But within a month of being there, I ended up getting the role of project manager, just through default that the person that they sent over there didn't like it and he left. So I stood in while they were sourcing someone else to do it. And within that time, they said, oh, well, you may as well just keep doing it.
And that was 4 years, was it?
2004 to 2007.
Years.
So 3 years.
And we have a photo of that too, don't we?
Oh. Yes.
So it's a photo of Chris with AK-47?
Yeah, just playing dress up.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And bandana.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, it was.
And that's in Iraq.
That's in Iraq, yeah. That's just outside my room by the looks of it.
Yeah, right. Mm. And who are you reporting to there as project manager of that? Because the program got awards, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
Congressional mention?
Yeah, it did. Because Congress, and I do remember in that very initial time where I was standing in, members from Congress were coming over, and I had to brief them on the training capability and outcomes that were happening at the time. And so generally, we reported directly to the US. So at the embassy, there was a general. I think it went through a colonel and then a general, but that was generally the process.
I think you reported to the Australian ambassador as well.
Yeah, we had visits from the Australian ambassador. We had visits pretty much from most of the hierarchy. You know, whether it was US or Australian.
And that would have been pretty hard on the family too, wouldn't it?
It was actually because, you know, I was coming back when I first went over. We were doing 3 months in, and then we get about 3 weeks out by the time you've got back to Australia and got back with your flying time. So, yeah, it was a lot of time in country, but you know, it was good. You know, is when you're actually over there and you've got some good camaraderie with, you know, it was an all male compound sort of where we were. I was about 180k out of Baghdad in an army base, and you know, food's cooked for you, no dishes, get your room clean for $1 if you want. You know, it was it. Besides the actual threat and danger, everything else was pretty good.
Yeah, right.
Good time of life.
Oh, you liked it?
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, right.
Because going back, because I'm so disciplined in my behaviours and what I do, hopping into a disciplined environment like that, I thrive. You know, my daughter's just recently joined the army, and she's very similar, and she's loving it. Like, you know, some people might think, oh, you know, it's hard or that, but every time I talk to her, she goes, absolutely love it, Dad. You know, and she just thrives in that sort of environment. I think we all find, you know, our tribe and where we work well in life, and that was mine.
Yeah, right. So when did your shoulder start to become a problem? Because this is your shoulder here. You've had a shoulder replacement. When did it start to play up on you?
I think looking back,
So for the audience, just a very arthritic shoulder with no. This is 2012. This X-ray.
Yeah.
And just got bone on bone with large spurs and osteophytes.
Yeah.
Completely worn out.
I can't really recall a specific moment, but that shoulder, I do remember I was working, when I came back from Iraq, Wayne Bennett offered me a role at the Brisbane Broncos.
And so this is 2006 training camp?
Came back from Iraq for that camp, but as in full-time, when I finished in Iraq, and he gave me a full-time role at the Broncos, and my shoulder was hurting then because I do remember trying to get physio there. So it had been quite a few years, but...
So you hadn't noticed it while you were fighting?
Don't recall. Right. I don't recall. But I think definitely in those later years, the shoulder was certainly inhibiting me.
Tell everyone the story about the 2006 Broncos training camp.
Go back there. Well, I think it came about because 2005 season, Broncos crashed out pretty early. And yet, on paper, we had probably the best team in the NRL, like I would have thought. And so, you know, talking with Wayne and some other, you know, management and coaches at the Bronx, we'd come up with an idea to run a camp different than what they usually do. Camps are usually, sure, they've certainly got some team building and a bit of hardship in there, but mostly it's around beers and golf and surfing. So this particular camp, because I was immersed in a network of, you know, army, regiment, tactical police, I was able to band together a group of trainers, and we derived this training program that, to describe it, was nothing but it was just brutal. You just wouldn't get away with it today. And I think it was a Saturday morning. Everyone had to be at the club at 6 o'clock, And I just remember the Broncos turning up in their casual gear, you know, their broad shorts and their shirt. Some had golf clubs because they thought they were going to the Coolum Hyatt and
Play golf and surf.
play golf and have some fun and maybe, you know, do some beach runs or something, but have beers every night. And Bruno Cullen came out and they're all sitting in the dressing room. And I know I had my fatigues on. And they're going, Hazy, what do you dress like that? You know, probably with a little bit more derogatory comment behind it. And Bruno came out and addressed them and said, look, change your plan. Coolum Hyatt's out. Let me introduce you to your trainers, and everyone's just standing around the room, all these trainers. So I hopped in and gave them a brief. I said, listen, guys, the next 7 days, you're going to have to dig deep and you're going to have to rely on the person left and right of you to get through it. And then I handed it over, and there was 24 of them, and we put them out on the field. They got stripped down to their underwear, had to put fatigues on. Their shirt, every shirt had a number from 1 to 24. And from that point on, they weren't allowed to call anyone by name. It was strictly by a number, and we were staff. And I remember we put them on the bus. We had them in their groups before we had them in the groups. I mean, they had one roll of toilet paper between a group of 6. And just to look on their faces, they were already defeated. You know, you got all these superstars and no one said anything. You know, they thought they were going to have a great holiday. And put them on the bus. We had media following us because the media wanted to find out where they were going and keep an eye on them, because remember, there's always trouble on football camps. So we ended up organised in Noggara Army Barracks, opened the boom gate, let the bus through. We went through the back way, got out, and we ended up back up at Sunshine Coast at Wild Mountain. And to give you an idea, I won't go on too much, but the very first exercise said, there's some fire. We're going to help the volunteer fire service out. There's some fires at the top of Wild Horse Mountain, and each team got a 20-litre jerry can, you know, of water. And so we're going to use that water, and we're going to help put the fires out the top. So off they went, and they had to march and keep their distance exactly behind each other the whole way up. And some thought it was a good idea to just drop some water on the way, drink some water, but waste it. But of course, there was no fire at the top, and it was let's go back down, and that was your water for the week. You know, so whatever they had after that walk up and down was all that group of 6 had for the whole week. And so that was just a little learning points of being able to respect and appreciate the smaller things in life, you know, and that's really what that camp was about. They were having a protein bar and maybe a can of baked beans or something a day for the first couple of days. And we had Greg Eastwood, who had just joined the team as a real youngster. He was really young. And we were doing an abseiling exercise, probably about day 3. Greg just wouldn't go over. He was scared of heights. He was fairly isolated too. He didn't really know the group. So what we said is, if his team could get him to go over the cliff, it was chicken dinner for everyone that night. So I don't know if they convinced him or threw him over, but he ended up down there. And so it was really good for someone like Greg, because it brought him into the group. Anyway, that night, the groups are in the forest, in that pine forest there, and no one knew whichever one. They're in groups of 6, so the distance was, you know, maybe a kilometre apart from each other, and no one knew where the other camps were. And so it was chicken dinner night. So they're sitting in their group of 6 waiting for their dinner, and I remember walking through with these 2 chickens, holding them by the legs, and they were flapping, right? And you just should have seen the look on their face. and it was like you can kill them, feather them, cook them. You can set them free. You can wait for them to lay eggs. Choice is yours, right? And so they had to have a debate about it. And I remember two guys in my group, they wanted nothing to do with it. They walked away. And it's because I had, guys that had done this properly. They walked them through, showed them exactly how it was done. And this is how it's done in the bush. This is actually, and so it wasn't about, I guess, the dark side of killing a chook. It was about these kids, because that's still what they were, learning that when they go through KFC or whatever, that's what the chook had to go through for them to eat it.
Yeah.
So what I loved about that camp was everything had a meaning and a purpose to teach that group something. And at the end of the day, I'll just give one more story. When we ended up down at Lamington National Park, and they had to do the Stinson Walk. These guys are hungry. They had not showered. Like, they weren't allowed to shower. They weren't allowed anything other than what we gave them. And so they did the Stinson Walk. They came back. The buses were there. And we said, righto, think about this. 1 minute to go. You're behind. Let's run to the bus. So everyone run. And as they got to the bus, of course, the bus took off. And it went another, half a K down the road. All right, we're in overtime, golden point, let's go. And we were probably about 4K away from base camp. And they got to the bus, and I won't mention who it was, but one of the players said, stuff them. And they kept on running all the way back to base camp. And that was it. Basically, we got back the next day, packed up, and they had a bit of fun. We took them shooting, took them boxing. They had a big boxing day. So it was a point to where it showed that they weren't reliant on us anymore, that they took control as a team, and they made a decision as a team that they were just going to run it back to base camp. And as much as that may not have been in the program, it was a good way of looking at how they were all individuals for most of that camp. And then they come together collectively, and that's pretty much what we were looking for. And as I lined them up at Suncorp on the very last day when I handed them back to Bruno Cullen, we had this group of men who were just sitting in a dressing room with their heads down when they were told that they were not going to the Coolum Hyatt. They were, it was like the life got taken out of them. And on the last day, they were standing at attention, and as I gave the brief and the handover to Bruno, I said, 7 days ago, you handed us, 24 great individuals. Today, I hand you back one outstanding team. And they went on to win the 2006 grand final. And on the day they came out of that dressing room and ran up the tunnel out to the field, their shirts that they wore on that camp hung up on the wall, just as a reminder of what they went through. Yeah, it was a great camp.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. We did the Australian cricket team not long after and did exactly the same camp with them. And they went on, they won the Ashes, they won the World Cup. Yeah, that's a whole new conversation, that camp. Probably much more to talk about with Warnie and McGill.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we won't go there.
Let's talk about your shoulder. So you got to the point, you were having trouble training. I think you were having trouble sleeping.
Yep.
And your shoulder's totally worn out. What was it like making that decision to have your shoulder replaced?
Well, the hard part for me is that recovery period. I'm even to this very day, I'm addicted, is the word, to ritual, my daily rituals of what I do, exercise-wise, food-wise, and to actually change that that was the reason I actually took so long to actually get it done. I'm sure when you saw it, it was probably well past its use by date. Yeah. And it just got to the point where, in actual fact, what happened was Rings called me and said we're having a reunion fight. It was an anniversary fight. I forget whether it was 20 years. I think it was 20 years in 2012, and we'd like you to headline it. So here I hadn't fought. I think my last fight, I came back from Iraq and I had another fight, a guy from Japan, and I knocked him out in something like 16 seconds. And I thought, well, that's it. I'm definitely retiring now. And then UFC 110 come to Australia and they signed me up for UFC 110. And I was fighting Elvis. And Elvis actually pulled out the day of weigh-ins. So we were in Sydney.
I remember it.
Yeah, done the press conference.
You were training me that week. Yeah,
that's right. Done the press conference, cut the weight. Morning of the weigh-in, he decides that his shoulder, he should have had a friend like you, his shoulder wouldn't let him fight, which, anyway, let's let that be.
Yeah, you weren't happy about it, were you?
Oh, not at all. I had friends flying from Afghanistan, all over the country, to come and watch that fight.
Yeah.
So for me to actually sit there and the first UFC in Australia, it was something that I thought would have been a great full circle.
Yeah.
So it meant a lot to me, just emotionally, that would have been a great grand finale. So.
And pulling out the day before, there's no way of getting a replacement in, was there?
No.
Whereas if it had been some time before that,
yeah,
you would have been able to organise something else.
Yeah, exactly. But those things happen, I guess. I couldn't imagine doing it. I mean, I'm thinking, I know how bad my shoulder was, UFC 110.
Yeah.
Right. I got the x-rays to prove it. Right. So that's what really put a sour taste in my mouth about it. But so in 2012, Japan said, look, we've got to fight. And so I went over and I fought. Wasn't a success. It was a great fight, got fight of the night, but I think Wayne Bennett has one of these sayings that says the operation was a success, but the patient died, and that's how I felt on that one. And so it was actually straight after that, Ken, I said, we'd had a good relationship, and I said, it's time to do it. Let's go.
Yep.
No more fighting. Definitely.
Yep. And then we did one of those paracarbons when there was new technology, and unfortunately that broke.
It did.
And then we had to go and do it again.
Yes.
The paratardon broke.
It did. Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I told you the truth, but I was having a little light roll.
Yeah. No, I remember. Yeah. You did tell me that.
It was Brendan O'Reilly, and he was just getting into that tough series.
Brendan.
Yep. Yeah. Remember the UFC contender. And I couldn't help myself. The time was up. It was exactly pretty much to the day. I said, just light. I mean, it was only light. It wasn't very hard. But then when I finished, I couldn't move it. It would actually seized. I thought, oh, this ain't good.
And now it's the better of your two shoulders, isn't it?
It is. Fantastic. Yeah, it's my favoured shoulder. The other shoulder's probably in need of some Ken Cutbush work.
Maybe one day. Looking back, what advice would you give to someone wanting to go down that career path of yours, to get to the top of an athletic endeavour like MMA fighting?
I always used 3 Ps. Positive, passionate. Could be, if you're not passionate about it, as we go back to when I said I gave up drinking, and it can be, people can give up lots of things. You don't have to be alcohol, but for me I saw that alcohol was the one thing that, as I said, I could measure myself. So it showed that the passion that I had was the most important, that for fighting was the most important thing in my life. When I wake up, my day was, if I'd write a diary, it was focused around being better at that, not at anything else. So being positive, being passionate about what you do, and surrounding yourself with people who positively energize you. You know, you can spend time with people and they can zap the life out of you. You know, they just suck the energy out of you. Or you can spend time with people, and when you walk out, you feel $1 million. You feel recharged, reset. You know, and I think that's what I did. I surrounded myself with people who really served my cause. You know, and being positive, they shared my journey with me. And I was just, like I said, very fortunate. It was my career. It's like, I think having everything in your life going the same way, in the same lane, where a lot of times life can set you up. That's why it's easier to do it when you're younger, you know, to when life's already sort of like set its way for you, because you want everything basically going in the same way and not fighting you. You know, I've got to go and do this down there, but I'll come back and do something I want to do here. And sometimes people can find themselves in that.
And do you ever regret giving up, you know, going out and, you know, having a social life and stuff?
Trust me.
Where you got to?
Trust me, Ken, I have made up for that. Well and truly.
Good.
Yeah. I don't mind a red wine. Mind you, I have not had one this year. That was just I decided about a month before Chrissy, because I like my red.
Yeah.
I said, that's it. So it's good to know my discipline still can hold to this day.
All right. Good. Well, Chris, thank you for coming in and joining me. It
Thanks,
was a
Ken.
wonderful chat. And
great having a chat.
Good to hear all of it, the full story.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Inside the Shoulder. I'm Kenneth Cutbush. I've been joined today by Chris Haseman. Chris Haseman is 2 times Martial Arts Hall of Famer. He has fought for the heavyweight title in rings. He's fought for the UFC, and he's trained me. He's also had a shoulder replacement, has a good insight into shoulder problems. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.